My dear students of class 10, as I told you earlier that I shall start teaching a previous lesson. So lesson number 3 onwards I am going to re-explain the moderates. You know the moderates. The first point, as we mentioned here, the moderates. Who are called moderates? Who are called the early nationalists? In the years 1885 to 1905, Congress was led by a group of leaders. They were known as the early nationalists or moderates. The moderates believed in the British sense of justice and fair play. They thought that the Englishmen are willing to put India on the path of democracy and self-governance. The moderates were included from all parts of India. W.C. Banerjee, Rashbihari Ghosh, Surendranath Banerjee from Bengal, Madan Mohan Malabya from Uttar Pradesh, and other moderate leaders were from Gujarat and Maharashtra, like Dadabhai Naoroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Mahadev Govind Ranade, Firoz Shah Mehta, etc. etc. Now, why are they called moderates? The early nationalists are called moderates also. Why? Because the early nationalists believed in moderate politics. The early nationalists adopted moderate politics. Their technique and method also were moderate. Their technique and methods also were moderate. They thought that they considered the Britishers to be superior to the Indians, hence they were grateful to them. They, praised the British for the introduction of Western education among them, especially English language. And that's why they had great faith in the British sense of justice and fair play. Next point, demands and methods of moderates. What are the demands? Before discussing about the demands of the moderates, I shall highlight on the methods of the moderates. The moderates adopted the method and technique like 3 P's. 3 P's means prayer, petitions, and protest. These 3 P's. Why? Because they thought that the Britishers were powerful and it was useless to them to go against the will of the British. So it would be better for them to make them understand with persuasive arguments their demands, their expectations from the British. If they were able to convince them, or to make them understand in polite language, then they would be able to achieve their goal, and the Britishers would accept their demands. That's why they always remain polite. They always remain polite and loyal to the British. So this is the technique and method of the moderates. And now, demands of the moderates. What were the demands of the moderates? There were certain demands of the moderates that presented before the British government. Number 1, constitutional demands. Second one, the economic demands. Third one, administrative demands. So these were the demands the moderates demanded. And other demands also they presented before the British government. Later I shall discuss about it. Next one, The first and foremost demand of the moderates, they demanded before the British government, these were constitutional demands. Now moderates wanted to share. The moderates wanted a large, wanted to have a large share in the government of India. That's why they requested the British to increase the number of seats for the Indians in the legislative council and legislative assemblies in the state and in the provinces. Second one, economic demands. The British moderates, they wanted to. The moderates wanted a reduction in land revenue, and also wanted to protect the interest of the peasants and farmers from the unjust demands of the zamindars. And next one, the moderates demanded for the development of banking industrial growth for the protection of Indian trade and commerce. And next point, administrative demand. The British government, from the very, very beginning, had been requesting the British government to allow the Indian civil service exam to be held both in England and India. Besides, the British government also requested the British to withdraw two acts, the Arms Act and the License Act. And that's why the British government was thinking whether it should be withdrawn. But another most important demand which was presented by the moderates before the British, that was the growth and development of primary education among the Indian people. So these are the administrative demands of the moderates. And next one, and before that, another one that is very important, the administrative demand, that is demand for the separation of executive and judiciary. Demand for a separation of the executive and judiciary. And at the same time, they also demanded higher ranks. The post of high ranks or higher ranks for the Indian educated people to be appointed in the administrative section of the British. So these are the administrative demands of the moderates. The next one that is very important, other demands. They demanded industrial growth through the trade protection, and apart from this, they also requested the British government to grant loans for the growth, for the industrial growth of India, for the growth of trade and commerce in India. So these are the other demands. These are the other demands of the moderates. Now, after the next point, the British reaction. The demands which were presented by the moderates before the British, some of their demands were, accepted by the British, and rest of the demands they did not accept. But still, the part of criticism by the moderate leaders in different journals, in different, newspapers, also harmed the sentiments of the British people. That's why they criticized the National Congress. How? They criticized the National Congress in many ways. It was Lord Dufferin who criticized the government, who criticized the British, criticized the moderate leaders by saying it that they were loyal, but in fact they were not loyal, they were disloyal, because they were criticizing the British government. The technique and method, whatever they followed, was criticism through constitutional process. Criticism through constitutional process, presenting demand through the framework of the British, through the framework of the British rule and through the constitutional procedure. Very good. But at the same time, you are criticizing us. You are writing against us in many journals, in many newspapers. You are, you are distributing a number of pamphlets and bills among the Indian people, writing against us. This is not fair. This is not good. That's why it was. That's why the Indian Congress leaders, the nationalist leaders, were criticized the British government. They reacted wrongly, and they they branded their leaders as, disloyal, as, disloyal, and, disloyal, court, and villains like that. This type of, languages they used against the Indian and the nationalist leaders, but still the Indian nationalist leaders did not leave hope and faith on the British government, because they knew that the day would come, the British would accept their demand of self-governance. That time they did not demand Swaraj, but only one demand. That time they demanded that large participation in the British administration, and wanted to be the member of the British administration in order to look after the miserable conditions of the Indian people, especially when natural disasters took place. There was none to help Indian people. So in order to remove the distress of the Indian people, in order to provide economic sanction for them, the Indian nationalist leaders wanted to take part in the British administration. That's why they requested the British government to increase the number of seats in the Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council, not only both in state and in the provinces. So these are the points, my dear students. But you have to keep one point in your mind, that is the British reaction. What the British reaction in that way? The British reaction was the British strongly criticized the Congress. That's why some of them who did not accept the technique and method, who did not approve the techniques and method of the moderates. The technique of 3 Ps means prayer, petition, and protest. Some of the Congress leaders, they did not accept it. They were thinking that the method, whatever was adopted by the moderates or early nationalists, could not bring success. They were unable to achieve success because the British did not understand the language of love and sympathy. They understand only the language of violence. That's why it would take time to reach their goal, to achieve success. Because of that reason, 3 Ps, adoption of 3 Ps, that method means prayer, petition, and protest. That technique and method was absolutely wrong. Ultimately, a group of Indian Congress leaders, they left the party and they established their own group. Later on, I shall discuss about it. So today's discussion already, I think, the re-explanation, whatever I have done today, I think you better understood the early nationalists. What is the meaning of early nationalists? Who were called early nationalists? Why were they called moderates? Demands, methods of the moderates. What were the demands that presented before the British government? And what technique and method the early nationalists adapted, and the methods and the demands, whatever they presented before the British government, whether the British accepted it, and while accepting the demands, what was about their reaction against the moderates. Each and every point I discussed. The last point you have to keep in your mind, that is very important. Some distinguished persons, especially, as I told you earlier, that the moderates were included from all parts of India. The moderate leaders were included in the Congress from all parts of India, like W.C. Banerjee, W.C. Banerjee, Surendranath Banerjee, Raj Bihari Ghosh, uh, Madan Mohan Malabya, Dadabhai Nauroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, M.G. Ranade, and Firoz Shah Mehta, they all played a tremendous role before the British government in order to draw the attention of the British about the miserable conditions of India. Dadabhai Nauroji, on being the member of the British Parliament, raised various questions against the British members of British Parliament, against the members of the British Parliament, in front of the members of the British Parliament, uh, uh, against Indian British government. He raised hue and cry in the British Parliament. He asked the members of the British Parliament to be sympathetic towards Indian people whose conditions were very miserable, who were living under below poverty line. There was no hope for the Indian people, especially educated Indian people. There was no job for Indian educated. There were no jobs for Indian educated people. The conditions of the peasants and farmers were very miserable. These all are all the points. These were all points thoroughly discussed in presence of the British members of Parliament, and that's why Dadabhai Nauroji also, on reaching India, he wrote the famous book Poverty and Un-British Rule. And why did he write it? And what was the concept of the book? What did he want to communicate for the Indian people and for the Britishers? Each and every point I shall discuss later. But one thing you have to keep it in your mind, that the early nationalists or the moderates had great faith on the British sense of justice and fair play. They pressed the British government for the introduction of Western education, English language. They pressed the British government for providing them Western culture among the Indians, and they also at the same time thanked the British government for the modern means of communication and transport. That's why the British government, the British from the very beginning were pleased. The Britishers were pleased on the modern leaders for their loyalty, but later on in course of time, the moderate leaders started criticizing the British government. That's why nationalist leaders were criticized by the British government. After after the end of the two sessions of the Congress.